Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another neglected gem. Today's neglected gem is Man Without a Star, directed by King Vidor from 1955. This is a relatively new release from Eureka Masters of Cinema, and this is entry number 267 in the Masters of Cinema series. Now, the reason I've put this as a neglected gem rather than a random review is because it was pretty much neglected by the people who made it. King Vidor was never really a Western fan and kind of thought he was slumming it while making this film. Kirk Douglas never really thought that highly of it. It was a kind of small film between bigger films, and the writer said he knocked it out in like 10 days. And he wasn't really that impressed with it either. But it's one of those 50s westerns that there's a lot more going on than it seems on the surface. So this also stars Jean Crane, Claire Trevor, William Campbell, Richard Boone playing a villain as usual, and an early non-credited but wonderful performance as always by Jack Elam. So Kirk Douglas plays this drifter who we see pretty much bagging a ride on a train. He's got a saddle, but he's got no horse. And he comes across this young kid, played by William Campbell, who's very headstrong, but also naive. And he kind of takes him under his wing as they come across Jack Elam, but I won't go into detail how they come across Jack Elam. And they get into this town, and we're kind of in the midst of the early stages of a cattle war between Jean Crane's character, who owns thousands of heads of cattle and wants to own more and is going to pretty much make the land barren with all our cattle that will be eating the grass, versus these smaller landowners and smaller cattle owners who are in the same land. Now, Kirk Douglas initially is kind of attracted to Jean Crane, but as the story progresses, he ends up being on the side of the smaller landowners. But again, it's not that simple. Kirk Douglas's character is fairly complicated. It does fall into one of those Kirk Douglas films where he likes being beaten up. He has scars, both psychological and physical. So very much like the Vikings, where he loses an eye, or Lust for Life, where he loses an ear, or Spartacus, where he is literally crucified. Kirk Douglas went through a phase of getting topless and showing off his scars and getting beaten up and mutilated. This is another one of those films. His relationship with the gun is kind of interesting, because it's one of those westerns where the non-violent alternative is actually the first alternative. Granted, there's still your usual shooting malarkey, but again, there's more going on than it seems to be in the surface. So he is very good at twirling his gun, and he teaches William Campbell's character, Jeff, how to shoot and how to handle a gun, even although that relationship changes at the end of the film and it becomes a much darker relationship. And you can tell that obviously, like quite a lot of Western heroes, Kirk Douglas has baggage from the past, And he also plays a banjo, and he sings some songs and dances and kind of is almost a buffoon at times. So it's a much kind of lighter, almost comical Kirk Douglas performance. But then it does get darker as his physical and psychological scars get shown off and discovered, because Kirk Douglas does not like barbed wire. He's had a bad experience with barbed wire, and the small landowners are putting up barbed wire to try and protect their grazing land from Gene Crane's huge herd of cattle. So they're putting up barbed wire, even though Kirk Douglas has this pathological hatred for barbed wire, which is obviously a metaphor for literally being fenced in. Because in some ways, Man Without a Star is a precursor to Lonely Are the Brave, the wonderful 1962 film. Kirk Douglas literally is a cowboy out of time. You know, he drives a horse. He rides a horse while, you know, there's cars and literally everything is being fenced off. So this is an interesting precursor to Lonely Are the Brave, which again, another kind of scarred character. So it's interesting that his hatred of barbed wire, his hatred of fencing off the West, but he ends up being on the same side as the people who are putting up the barbed wire, which is again is kind of interesting. Gene Crane's character is like a strong woman, which again you don't see very often outside of Johnny Guitar and 40 Guns, and a few other westerns. But she comes on the scene, and everybody assumes she'll be like the romantic lead, but she's very ruthless. She's very harsh. She gets what she wants. Her idea is pretty much to come in with as many heads of cattle, pretty much just scourge the land clean of grass, and then sell up and move on and get all the money. So obviously it's about capitalism as well, but her position as pretty much the alpha male, even though she's female, she initially wants Kirk Douglas to take over as the foreman, but he's not really interested in that. He's more interested in her body, basically, which she kind of gives him, but just as essentially blackmail for taking over as the foreman, which he turns down anyway. And then Richard Boone turns up later, and he truly becomes her left hand or right hand. And Richard Boone does Richard Boone things. He doesn't like overplay it, but he is wonderful as the villain. He is wearing a black hat after all. And again, the character of Jeff, who, as we see him at the start, he's naive and headstrong, and Kirk Douglas pretty much takes him under his wing or adopts him, but then it gets to the point where they're on either side of the war or the battle between land rights, and he chooses one side and Kirk Douglas chooses the other. Plus the two villains of the piece, Gene Crane and Richard Boone, don't necessarily get what you think they'll get in the standard Western. So again, even although this film was viewed as a little film that didn't amount to anything by the people who made it, there's actually a lot going on in it. And it's certainly, again, another one of these little 1950s Technicolor westerns that have a lot more going on than at first glance. Again, there's a wonderful scene where Kirk Douglas whips out his gun, not his banjo, and then he realises what he's done, and his kind of self-loathing that he does really well really comes out, and it is another wonderful Kirk Douglas performance. The Eureka release has a nice little booklet, and it has a commentary with Kim Newman, who gets everywhere, and Barry Forshaw, which is excellent, because it's based on a novel that, according to Kim Newman, the author only ever wrote one novel, but parts of the novel have been used in about 18 different films, which is kind of interesting. And we get Neil Sinyard on Man Without a Star, who hasn't been around for a little while, but he's actually popped up in the last few films that I've actually watched. And Neil Sinyard's always good about the background of the film, and just the way Kirk Douglas and King Vidor both kind of viewed the film. So, I mean, also I'm a fan of westerns, and it's been one of those westerns that I've been looking for Blu-ray. It is on Kino Lorber in Region A. This is a Region B, Eureka Master of the Cinema. But it's a little gem that I think is neglected, especially by the people who actually made it. But also, if you're a fan of like the Bud Bedicker, Randolph Scott films, or Lonely Are the Brave with Kirk Douglas, it's a wonderful film along those kind of lines, with a lot more going on under the surface than at first it seems. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know if you've seen Man Without a Star, which kind of relates to the story Kirk Douglas tells Jeff about everybody's got a star. So it's not actually Man Without a Star as in not being a sheriff or the law. It's about Kirk Douglas basically not having a star and basically being a law unto himself, I guess. But you can let me know if you've seen it and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for more neglected gems. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.